Welcome to Three Count Commentaries. I am MagMongoSlade. Today we're going to talk about Vince McMahon's statement on the Netflix documentary, as well as Janelle Grant's pair of comments about the documentary. So Janelle Grant hires a PR team. It was announced the week of the 19th. And then on the 19th itself, a week before the documentary comes out, Janelle Grant's representatives decided to comment on the Vince McMahon lawsuit, not the lawsuit, I'm sorry, but with the Netflix documentary. I'm not going to read it all. It says, Ann Callis, Grant's attorney, began, this is from Post Wrestling. Ann Callis began by reiterating Grant's experience as a survivor of, quote, incomprehensible abuse, describing the extreme cruelty inflicted by McMahon from 2019 through early 2020. Callis said Grant now suffers from PTSD, suicidal ideations, and an inability to leave her home for extended periods. So Grant's representatives confirmed that she did not participate in the Netflix docuseries. Callis expressed hope that the series would accurately portray Mr. McMahon's abhorrent actions, but voiced concerns about previous media representations of Grant. So now this is where I didn't understand why she needed to have a PR firm. And that just, again, it raised my eyebrow. What does she need a PR firm for? Anyway, Kendra Barkoff-Lamey, who used to work for Joe Biden, and it's in her bio on Twitter. She used to work for Joe Biden, and now she works for Janelle Grant. How is she able to afford this? Wasn't she poor and destitute and all this kind of stuff? Ain't that what they told us? She was vulnerable and required WWE to provide her a job. Now all of a sudden she can hire people who used to work for Joe Biden? I guess you're not supposed to answer those questions. Anyway, her PR firm said, quote, many stories in recent months have not portrayed her the way she deserves. Okay, fair enough. But this is a back and forth thing that they got going on here where they're playing tit for tat. So they reiterated that the lawsuit is on pause while the Southern District of New York investigates Vince McMahon. Says, when asked about the pace of the investigation, Callis acknowledged the complexities involved, but emphasized the importance of thoroughness, saying, quote, we want it to be right, not fast. All right. Callis said they have every reason to believe Grant isn't the only victim of abuse by McMahon. Reportedly, McMahon has agreed to at least 4 other non-disclosure agreements with women who worked for WWE. Okay, but do they have anybody else? Or it says, while the team has not spoken to any current victims, they believe others could come forward citing the existence of non-disclosure agreements related to the case. Okay, so they haven't spoken to anybody, so how do they know that these people are victims? And why are we phrasing this way without knowing the information? Anyway, throughout the call, questions centered on the portrayal of Grant and her story in Mr. McMahon docuseries. Grant's team confirmed they had not seen the documentary and reiterated that Grant, quote, deserves the opportunity to tell her own story in her own way at the right time. That is true. It says, responding to concerns about the documentary potentially whitewashing WWE executives who were anonymized in Grant's lawsuit or cherry-picking Grant's story, Callis declined to criticize the project and said that she's confident that Grant will have her day in court. Callis confirmed the identities of the other. Okay. All right. So, okay, we're going to continue by saying, and Callis says Janelle is a human being who deserves justice. She deserves her day in court. That's our bottom line. She's a victim and a survivor. She is not a WWE storyline. The PR lady, Barkoff-Lamey, says, quote, I think it's really important to note the emotional trauma she's experienced. And add to that your thinking about how you want to frame your stories and how you want to report on this in the future. Okay, so it's emotional manipulation. You're not supposed to ask logical questions like, where's this woman getting all this money from? Or is it just that these women are going to sit around and get paid from any kind of supplement or something like that, and they're doing it, quote unquote, pro bono for the lulz and for the attention, and then they'll make money on the back end. But I find it very suspicious that somebody who was poor and destitute all of a sudden has connections all the way up to Joe Biden. Very suspicious. But Vince McMahon himself put out a statement on his Twitter account, which was very weird because it came completely out of nowhere after 2 days before the documentary is to be released. And despite it seemed like the Janelle Grant's team was putting out their statement under the belief that the documentary would be a puff piece and that Janelle might actually get attacked in the documentary. That was generally the way I kind of saw it. Is like, okay, they're trying to soften the blow just in case the documentary is a puff piece or whatever. And now Vince is coming out saying basically it's a hit job. So Vince McMahon put out, quote, "I don't regret participating in this Netflix documentary. The producers had an opportunity to tell an objective story about my life and the incredible business I built, which were equally filled with excitement, drama, fun, and a fair amount of controversy and life lessons. Unfortunately, based on an early partial cut I've seen, this doc falls short and takes the predictable path of conflating the Mr. McMahon character with my true self, Vince. The title and promos alone make that evident. A lot has been misinterpreted or left out entirely in an effort to leave viewers intentionally confused. The producers use typical editing tricks with out-of-context footage and dated sound bites, etc., to distort the viewer's perception and support a deceptive narrative. In an attempt to further their misleading account, the producers use a lawsuit based on an affair I ended as evidence that I am, in fact, Mr. McMahon. I hope the viewer will keep an open mind and remember that there are two sides to every story." This is an interesting comment because he completely and totally discredits or tries to discredit the documentary before it comes out. But this is, quite frankly, the best publicity the documentary could have ever asked for. Vince McMahon not being happy with the cut is the best that they could have asked for. They couldn't have asked for anything better than him being upset. There were so many people who were like, oh, Bill Simmons, he's friends with Vince, it's going to be a puff piece. And then, Janelle Grant's team tried to jump out in front of it saying, oh, Janelle's a human being, she's not a storyline, blah, blah, blah. And now Vince is like, I don't like it. It make me look bad. And I would imagine he's seen all 6 episodes by now. But the thing about documentaries is pretty much all documentaries are going to be deceptively edited for storyline purposes. And at this point, Netflix has more of an incentive to bury Vince than they do to have to protect them. They want people to watch this thing. All right. That's really what it boils down to. Vince pretty much lays out the lawsuit as an affair that he ended. Okay, but it doesn't, that is just one element. Again, I said before that Vince has been involved with so much stuff, and I was wondering how much of that stuff they would cover. And he didn't seem to mention anything else. He just mentions the quote unquote affair, which of course is the Janelle Grant lawsuit. And that's it. If that's the only thing that they talked about, he got away scot-free. I'm kind of on the AEW fan side on this one, like the hardcore internet guy. Like, there's so much stuff that they could have put in this documentary that Vince that can make people look bad at Vince. I think a lot of that stuff can't be proven anyway. All of these folks talking about Vince McMahon with briefcases full of money, getting Jimmy Snuka off. It's like, man, what is wrong with these guys? You think that he's just walking around with briefcases full of money for people. That's just insane. And it's something that you have to believe on by, being a person who reads the dirt sheets. Nobody in real life believes that actually happened. The Rita Chatterton thing actually folds into the overall sexual improprieties of Vince McMahon, as well as the tennis salon situations and those kinds of things. But like the Owen Hart situation, of course, Chris Benoit, the very public blow-ups with Bob Costas and other people in public. There's been a lot of really weird situations that happened with Vince. If this Janelle Grant thing is the only thing he was pretty much upset about, he got away scot-free. If this is the only thing that pissed him off or upset him, that he had to address it in public 2 days before the documentary went live, he got away scot-free. All Vince had to do was say nothing. Really didn't do him any good to say anything, if we being honest. But I would have let his team, and it's clear to me that Vince didn't write this. But why didn't his team put out an official statement after the first episode or something? Trying to jump in front of this is very weird, especially since it's only 2 days before. So Vince makes his comment, and so Kendra Barkoff-Lamey put out a statement saying, quote, Vince McMahon physically and emotionally abused, sexually assaulted, and human trafficked Janelle Grant for more than 2 years. Calling his horrific and criminal behavior an affair is delusional and nothing more than a sad attempt to save his shredded reputation. Although Ms. Grant has not seen the, quote, Mr. McMahon docuseries, we hope it shines a bright light on his abhorrent and criminal actions by accurately portraying the realities of his abusive and exploitive behavior. Ms. Grant will no longer be silenced by McMahon. Her story, though deeply troubling and exceptionally painful, is one that can help other abuse survivors find their voices. We seek to hold McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and WWE accountable and give Ms. Grant her day in court. And then the tweet says, Ann Callis, attorney for Janelle Grant, the former WWE employee and sexual assault and human trafficking survivor, responded to Vince McMahon tonight. And then that was the statement. Okay. So it just basically reiterates what they said before, that Janelle Grant is a victim. She's a survivor of human trafficking. So much so, she had hired a PR firm. She's suicidal, but she hired a PR firm. Okay. All right. They really landed on kind of thick. The fact of the matter is, I get why all of this is happening. Clearly, the documentary, most people have not seen it, don't know what it is, don't know what it's going to be. It's 6 parts. So we don't know which part is going to drop the hammer on Vince. Maybe all of them will. Who knows? It stands to reason that Vince might not be happy with the final cut, considering he feels, and just looking at the wording of his comment, he said that they had an opportunity to tell an objective story about his life, and he feels like their story is not objective. Well, we live in a world where this documentary had to get put out, I'm guessing, before the end of the story. Now, we don't know clearly what's going to happen when this whole thing is over. Vince might not even survive this lawsuit, if we're being honest. So we don't know. He may fuck around and conk out on us in the next couple of weeks or something like that. And we may never see the end of this thing. They can still continue to go on without him, but, he may never actually get on the stand and be questioned or deposition taken and all that kind of stuff. We at the point now where they're just into mudslinging, and Vince is claiming that the documentary is going to be biased and that the documentary is deceptive. And Janelle Grant is like, I'm a victim. And her attorneys and everybody else, she's a victim. It's like, this is a whole bowl of nothing, The Vince McMahon's comment, of course, is important because he almost never tweets. So, and I don't think he's tweeted since he tweeted his resignation, which was not tweeted on any official WWE letterhead. And this tweet also is not signed by Vince at all. It just has words on a page, and it looked like maybe it was a screenshot, maybe it was like written like an email and then cut and paste into a Word document or something like that and tweet it out. But it's not like something from an official desk. It's just basically like his thoughts about this thing. And I knew that he was going to be able to see it before it airs. I mean, that pretty much was obvious, right? So now he's seen it. He doesn't like the cut. Too bad, I guess. Had nothing you could do about it. I'm glad he doesn't regret it, but it's out there now, brother. You sat down and agreed to it. Check and mate. Now they can leave on the cutting room floor whatever they want. They can put in whatever they want. They can add. I mean, you gave them all this free reign to do whatever they wanted to do, and this is what they chose to do. And we don't even know what it's going to turn into yet. But I think it's pretty fair to look at this thing now and say that the anti-McMahon contingent online is going to be happy with the documentary because Vince is already unhappy with it. But Vince is also egotistical, and we don't know if just, taking what was said seriously is enough to set him off. Meltzer says that, when he was interviewed, that there was no stones unturned, that they asked him pretty much about everything. And I'm very suspicious of Meltzer's takes on things because, again, Meltzer, not only has he made a lot of huge mistakes recently, but he has also made mistakes in history that we have not double checked. I mean, this guy writes pretty much a weekly newsletter. You would have to dedicate your entire life to going through and double checking every single story that he wrote, and he's written a lot of stories, so we don't know what the guy said, and since Vince was so vague about what he was obvious about the deceptive editing and stuff like that, but we don't know if he has a problem with some of the talking heads that they put in it. Like, does he have a problem with like a Dave Meltzer man in it, or like a David Shoemaker who manages to make his way into these things all the time? Does he object to those kinds of people being involved? Because, I see why you might. So, but I don't know. We'll see. And I think the world is watching with bated breath what's going on with this Vince McMahon stuff, and it's going to be very interesting. Let's add this, because this was announced this morning, the morning of September the 24th, the day before the Vince McMahon documentary was set to release, that Vince McMahon tried to buy back the rights to the documentary. So despite what he said in his statement, that he regretted it, trying to buy it back means that you regret it, old man. So here's from Puck, a screenshot by Brandon Thurston. It says, McMahon was still nervous about the doc, and after seeing early footage, he actually tried to buy the project back from Netflix, per two sources familiar. Netflix declined to comment. Vince also had Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel, his new partner in TKO, chime in on his behalf, also voicing concern about the doc's treatment of Vince's alter ego, Mr. McMahon, which ended up being the title of the doc. Netflix refused to let the project go, and then this past January, the worst McMahon scandal broke, with a former employee sued alleging terrible abuse. That was 2 days after Emanuel and Endeavor president Mark Shapiro had brokered the blockbuster $5 billion deal to bring WWE to Netflix, and after Netflix had already dated the Mr. McMahon documentary for March. Those plans were quickly scrapped, and Smith embarked on another revision. So, Vince McMahon tried to buy back the documentary. Ooh, so this is crazy, right? This is a guy who spent years, destroying his own reputation, going on television, Donahue and Bob Costas, making himself look crazy. And then he went into seclusion. I think that was around the time where Linda was running for office, and she was very public, and she got destroyed quite often for her relationship with Vince and her relationship to the WWE and all that sort of stuff. And that was very problematic for Linda as she tried to be a public figure, which explains why Vince tried to keep his affairs quiet. And then, these things couldn't be controlled anymore. They couldn't be contained. And then he became very, very possessive over his image. He became very possessive over how people viewed him. He stopped doing public interviews. And this was, of course, as he got older. Then, of course, he would do an interview here with Stone Cold Steve Austin, and then he didn't do a public interview, sit down again until Pat McAfee. And then he didn't do another one until the company was sold. So you saw that Vince became a little bit more, I guess you could say, what's the word I'm looking for? You can either call it egomaniacal, or he became a little bit more sensitive to how he was viewed in the media the older he got. And the more these situations stacked up on top of each other. Because he used to be front and center for anything that was controversial about WWE. Whether it was Brian Pillman, Chris Benoit, Owen Hart. He was front and center right there, taking the heat, trying to push back. And then he started to fall back. Then you could only really get Vince to talk about a subject if you talked about it at the conference call. So now I'm thinking that he's very touchy about these subjects, and he's just trying to hide it and get away from it. Or he just wants his story to be told. He wants to be in control of it. But he gave that control away. That was a foolish mistake on his part. And I'm okay with whatever Netflix puts out there, because he still has the option of doing his own documentary if he wants to. But who the hell would watch it if it's just Vince McMahon glossing over all of the issues that we want to talk about? So his feathers being ruffled over this documentary is actually very good. It's the best promotion that the documentary has ever had, is that Vince does not want it out there. The fact that he tried to buy it back, the fact that he denounced it 2 days before, is perfect. Absolutely goddamn perfect promotion. Almost like Vince McMahon himself booked the show. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later. No one does it better.